Hi there, welcome to or welcome back to Tiff Reads Books, where I read books and then I talk to you about them. And today I had an idea and I just really need to get it out there and get it, stop it from kicking around my head. So it's Pisces season, and as a Pisces, I get really excited when I see those Instagram posts that are like book recommendations for Pisces, and they're all romantic fantasy, which is fine, but I'm not really that much into it. I've tried a lot of them and they just don't work for me. And I'm sure there are other recommendation lists out there that don't just include romantic fantasy, and I may be doing something with those later, but right now I haven't looked yet, and I just got the idea to look for my own. And part of the reason there's always romantic fantasy is that Pisces are dreamers. They're a bit fantastical, whimsical, surreal, idealist, spiritual, and then there's always that, oh, Pisces is the most romantic sign. And as someone who doesn't always identify with that romanticness and is somewhere on the aromantic spectrum, I just really need something different in my Pisces recommendations. So I've made some suggestions based off of books that I have read in the last year and a half, and also some from my TBR that just give me that vibe. I could very well be wrong because I haven't read them yet, but they're high up on my list and they kind of give me that vibe from the synopsis, but we know that synopses can be misleading. So I'm going to give a few categories for Pisces traits and some books that I think fit the tone of those traits, either because of a character or the overall tone of the book. These are books that fit that trait, but then also have something about them that is surreal, ethereal, spiritual, old soul-y type of like that Pisces feel. Some that have to do with water. Anxious water makes me feel like Pisces, like cresting waves. It's not calm waters. Like Pisces are anxious for the most part. Like it's the indecisiveness that's there. That's one of like the negative traits, is like the inability to like make decisions on your own and just to like, so I feel like cresting waves, turbid water, those are the Pisces vibes that I'm thinking of when I think of Pisces. So that being said, I'm going to give you some books. So we're going to start off with creative. Pisces are generally known to be creative. Because of that, I've got 3 recommendations for these. The Night Circus. So this one does kind of fit a little bit in the romance category as well. It has that kind of surreal, ethereal kind of vibe to it where everything's kind of dreamlike in the circus. So Night Circus follows Celia and Marco, who are 2 magicians placed on a metaphorical chessboard to compete against each other in this competition that their mentors have set up, and it spans a very long time. They end up setting up this night circus, which kind of creates this like time bubble around them, so they live a lot longer, and inside this night circus they're creating these fantastical elements to compete with each other over who can make the better thing. And in the bits and pieces of time that they see each other, they end up falling for each other. I really liked this one as someone who doesn't really like romance, because the romance in it is not very heavy. It's not very heavy romance. It is not the dueling wizards that the synopsis on the back gives you. It is just this very atmospheric, high vibes, low plot. Look at this cool circus I made up. Here's some characters in it. Aren't they cute? That's pretty much what this book is, and I really loved it. It feels like that creative aspect of Pisces. The next one is a little bit more obvious, I think, which was Legends and Lattes, and I picked this one because of Tandri specifically. Tandri is a very sensitive character, her being a succubus and being in tune to people's emotions, but she's also extremely creative, doing the lettering and everything for the signs. And I'm jumping ahead of myself because everyone knows Legends and Lattes, but I gotta give you the synopsis. So Viv is a retiring killer for hire from a D&D standard crew. She's a sword slinger, but she decides she's gonna hang up her sword and start a coffee shop, and in that she meets Tandri as her first person that she hires, and Tandri does all the art for the menu boards for her and also helps her come up with ways to like get out of these situations that she ends up finding herself in throughout the running of a coffee shop. So because of Tandri, I kind of put this in the creative vibe. Then I have Nettle and Bone, which could be a little bit of a weird pick maybe, but it just felt right. So Nettle and Bone follows Mara, who is I believe she's a younger sister, maybe a middle sister, can't remember, but her older sister is going to be married off to she's the youngest, that's right, because both her older sisters have been married off to this prince. First one died mysteriously of an accident, and the second one is about to give birth to another child, I think. And Mara decides that she needs to kill this prince. So she goes to a witch she's the Dust Wife, and she gives Mara these 3 tasks so that she will help her go kill the prince. And she comes up with ways to get out of all these situations and just be super creative in her thought process throughout the book. So this is, again, someone who's not actually making something, someone who's just a creative thinker. And so it kind of fit in that with me. She also doesn't feel very confident in herself. And there's kind of, again, this kind of otherworldly vibe to the whole story, because it's a fairy tale. It's got a lot of fantasy stuff in it. So those are my 3 for creative. Pisces are emotionally intuitive is one of the big ones that you always hear. So I have 3 books for here as well, which, again, these are kind of different recommendations. The first one I have is The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and this follows Yetu, who is the historian for a group of mermaids. And the way that this group does their memories is that once a year, they all get together and the historian will share out the memories of their past, because it is so tragic that it's emotionally overwhelming for everyone to hold on to it. And that's because they are descended from the women who jumped overboard on the slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade, and their children became these mermaids. So Yetu just gets constantly bombarded by these memories and feeling very just like swallowed by them. When she shares them out to everyone, she flees. So she kind of traps everyone in her community with these memories while being able to like absolve herself of them. And she ends up finding herself thrown onto a beach where she has to heal and recover, and she ends up making friends with a few of the 2-leggers, as they call them, on shore, who help her gain her health back, and then she returns after she's come to terms with the fact that she did flee from it. And so I picked this one for emotionally intuitive for the obvious reasons that she's responsible for carrying all of the emotions that her whole community feels over these memories. And in general too, before that, they talk about before she took on the historian role, she was chosen because of her emotional like acuity to everything, and so she feels constantly smothered and drowned by these emotions, which just really fits with the vibes. Plus we have the water added into it. I really recommend reading this story. It's very rhythmic and lyrical, and it is based on a song or an album, I believe, and the story of how it became is really, really good, and I recommend looking into it. River Solomon is an amazing author, and I really recommend. Is another one that's maybe different. The Green Mile by Stephen King. So I picked this because of John Coffey, who is extremely emotionally involved with all of the characters in the story, being able to pick up on things that are needed and having a bit of the shine and just being super emotionally involved. So Green Mile, I keep talking about why I pick it before I tell you the plot. Green Mile is told from the perspective of the like head prison guard for the death row of this prison during the Great Depression. And we're told this as he's writing his memoir of like one of the most memorable years that he had being in charge of the Green Mile, which is what they called their death row. And he had this prisoner, John Coffey, who was there for violently assaulting 2 little girls. And our main character is constantly wondering if he actually did it based on this man's interactions with everyone around him, where he's helping everyone. He cries all the time. He's super emotionally involved with everything, and he seems to know how people are feeling before they express how they are feeling about things, and seems to know things that people shouldn't know. I also picked this because the character that we are told the story through himself has a lot of compassion, especially for a man of that age in that time. And the way he's telling his story, he seems to be a little less on the like I am a tough macho man type of side, but a little more attuned with his emotions, and actually is like attuned to other people's as well, in a very kind of different way. And Stephen King actually, I think, does a really good job of writing men who are supposed to be good people, not his villains, which we get a lot of people talking about his villains, but he does, I think, a good job of writing men who have an emotional range and some sort of emotional intelligence. Even if they're not the most emotionally intelligent, they have at least a little bit. So that's the Green Mile. The last one I have is Mink River, and I think this is a love letter to the Pacific Northwest. This follows so many characters. It's not a plot-heavy book. It's much more about vibes and telling the stories of the people through, like, as if you're like looking through their window at them in this community in coastal Oregon. And it basically follows over the course of a season. And you get told what's going on by like what berries are in season at the time. So we start off with salmon berries and we end with blackberries, and I just really like that. As someone who's from the Pacific Northwest, it felt so much like home, and I think that's part of why I really am drawn to putting it in this group, because the Pacific Northwest just feels like Pisces to me in a lot of ways. So one of our main characters is named Worried Man, and he is a elder of the community, and he is part of the Public Works. He is one of two people in the Department of Public Works, and he believes the Department of Public Works should do public works. So one of his public works is that he goes out with the town doctor every night, and they do this big loop around the community. And Worried Man is able to feel how people are feeling. If people are feeling pain or fear, he's drawn to them so that he can bring the doctor to help them. So he is obviously that emotionally intuitive person that I'm picking for why this feels like that. But everyone else in this story has such a level of emotional intuition or feels emotions very strongly. Worried Man's daughter, is it No Horses? Yeah, because her name's Nora. No Horses. She suffers with anxiety and depression, like pretty strong depression, and the way that it's talked about and dealt with and the way that the words that are used around it feel very accurate to how they actually feel, and also give more to that kind of vibe of the Pisces-ness of the emotional, like overwhelming emotionalness, which kind of goes along with the emotional intuition. So those are my 3 for emotionally intuitive. My next one is indecisive, and I have 3 for this as well, and I think I can be a little bit shorter about these. So indecisiveness is like constantly like one of the worst Pisces traits. I struggle with it so badly. Even if I don't really believe in any of this stuff, I like going like, yeah, I identify with that. Yeah, I identify with that. It's kind of fun to just like pick and choose things you identify with. So indecisiveness. This is kind of what inspired this list, is this first one, and I just finished this book today. Bright and Dangerous Objects. So this has really mixed reviews. People either love it or hate it, but I just finished it and I really loved it. It was prose heavy, very little plot, very much vibes, and very reflective. We were very much inside our main character, Sauvage, who is a saturation diver, and she is 37. Hi, I'm about to turn 37. So I like just really identified with this. She basically, we're getting a snapshot of her life where she's been with her partner James for 3 years, and she's fairly comfortable in the relationship, but she still feels like she's got one leg out the door. She doesn't know what she wants for anything. She can't make any decisions. But she has decided that she's going to apply for this mission to Mars, but she can't decide if she should tell James about it because she doesn't think she's going to get it, for one. And for two, what would happen to their relationship if she tells him? And it's constantly her going back and forth, like, I should tell him, I'm not going to tell him, I should tell him, I'm not going to tell him. And in the middle of, like, while she's done this application, James is like, hey, we should have a baby. And he tells her to think about it, but because she's so bad at making decisions, she talks about how she's decided that her best way to make decisions is to just decide yes and try it. And if she likes it, she likes it. If she doesn't, she'll never have it again. So she decides to do this with having a baby. But because she is 37, she feels like her choice is about to be taken away from her, so she should just choose yes. And it's clearly what her partner wants, and she feels like she can make it work. She can, do these deep sea dives. Why can't she do this? Which is fair as well. And so we kind of have a lot of her just inner turmoil throughout this book, and her constant inability to just choose something, anything. And it just kind of, it really resonated with me in a lot of different ways that made me feel very weird things about myself. And it's not for everyone, clearly, but I really liked it. The next one is Robber Girl by S.T. Gibson. This is a YA fantasy that has a lot of horror elements. I feel like with any other author, this would have been called a horror, because it was very paranormal, supernatural, dark, horror-y behind everything. But we have these two characters, Helvig. The last one was Sauvage. This is Helvig. Helvig and Gerda. And they are like 17, 18. And Helvig is the daughter of a leader of a band of thieves and robbers. And she is hiding in the woods, waiting for someone that her and her group of men can steal from to come along the trail. And along comes Gerda. And when they go to attack to like rob Gerda, she's like, I'm a witch. And all of Helvig's men are afraid of her. And Helvig's like, no, it's just a girl. We're going to bring her in, but I'm going to pretend she's a witch so that I can keep her. So because Helvig is 17 and she's very used to getting everything that she wants, and so part of her wants a friend. There's no really other women in the group that she can be friends with, but she's also finds Gerda attractive, and she's struggling with her attraction to women because it's not appropriate for the time, the era, and her community. So she's struggling with that. And so her and Gerda become friends, and Gerda's on this mission, and Helvig, now I'm mixing the two names together. Helvig goes back and forth between whether she should just let Gerda go on her mission or whether she should try to force her to stay with her. And all of this kind of, what do I do if she goes? Do I follow her? There's a lot of Helvig not knowing what she's supposed to do in these situations and how she's supposed to feel, and her wrestling with deciding how she actually feels about things. So, indecisiveness. The other one is a cute one, Garlic and the Vampire. So this is a little less indecisive and a little more like anxious about decisions, where Garlic is a sentient bulb of garlic brought to life by a witch, and she's very anxious. She's always worried that people are mad at her, that she's doing the wrong thing. So she's doing the wrong thing. She struggles to make a decision about a lot of things, but she gets voluntold that she's going to go see this rumored vampire. And someone is supposed to go with her, but they back out, and she's left all alone to go approach this vampire. And it turns out he's not what everyone thinks he is. So it was really cute, really wholesome, and definitely a really interesting way to present like the different different facets of anxiety to young people, because this is a middle grade. And I really appreciated how it was represented and how it was dealt with and how other members of the community dealt with it. And yeah, it's a really good story about a little indecisive garlic bulb, and I really liked it. And I really recommend it. Okay, so pessimistic, one of the other negative qualities. And this is often put into idealistic as well, like realistic, but also cynical. So I just went with pessimistic. And I'm interpreting this in kind of a different, slightly interesting way, I guess. So my first one is I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, the graphic novel, or the manga, however you want to call it. So this one is a YA story where we follow a main character whose name we don't get told till the end. So I'm not going to tell you his name because his name appears in square brackets with whatever he thinks the other character is saying to him. So at one point it's like weird classmate coon, shy classmate or something like that. There's like a couple other ones, but I think it spoils things if I say them. So it's whatever he feels about himself, like he is put in the brackets, whatever the subtext that he thinks he's hearing from when people say his name. So we're starting with that, which is a very like worried about how people are feeling about me type of Pisces thing. And he accidentally finds out that one of his classmates, whose name is Sakura, got a terminal illness. Something is wrong with her pancreas. And since now he knows, and he's the only other one in her life besides her parents that know, she decides they're going to be best friends. And she's going to drag him out to do all the things that she really wants to do because she can be open and honest with him, where she doesn't want her other friends to know that she's dying. so she can be herself with him where she can't with them. So this kind of frees her, and she just kind of drags him along. And in the beginning, he starts off, he's just humoring her because he doesn't really like being around people. He's very introverted. He'd prefer to just lay around and read and not have to interact with people. He finds it way too much work to understand how people communicate with each other, and it's just too hard. So he would just rather be on his own. And so Sakura, in a little bit of a manic pixie dream girly way, kind of brings him out of his shell, but at the same time, he does start becoming a better friend to her. He actually does things for her, but is supportive of her. He doesn't just expect her to be there for him and to fix him. It's more that he starts to realize that she's changing him, and then he starts to become someone who he actually likes, and he gets really close with her. And then, of course, things happen. This is a very sad girl book, too. Just really sad in unexpected ways. It's more, the sad parts of it were like the realizations that he had about himself. So it has that aspect, too. So I put it pessimistic because the main character in the book is really pessimistic and negative and has a lot of like internalized like negative self-talk. So it fits in that kind of pessimistic, cynical category. The next one is The Light Pirate. So this book is a literary fiction with some sci-fi elements, some climate disaster. And we're following Wanda, who was born in the middle of a massive hurricane, and she lives in Florida. And so we're following her as over these like time jumps where Florida gets more and more devastated by climate change and further underwater. So part of what's here is the underwater thing. And this is that the whole story, while it has this like thin line of hope going through it, every time something good happens for Wanda, something else tragic happens. And so it's kind of there, and like the whole story is kind of pessimistic with this thin line of hope. Wanda also has a lot of indecisiveness and a lot of like internalized, whatever can go wrong will go wrong type of outlook, while also just being a fighter. So there's some other like elements in there the whole story isn't, but I think some of the parts of it fit really well. Compassionate. Back to some positives. So I wanted to do like a negative sandwich here. So for Compassionate, I have Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, and this follows Toadling, who is a changeling. Well, no, she's not a changeling. She was replaced by a changeling. She's a human who was raised by fairies, and she has been set to guard this tower. And there is a knight who comes, and at first he's like, oh, you're the curse in this tower, and then he learns that she's actually the cursed one and decides he needs to save her. And it's not the knight that has the compassion. I mean, he's a very nice guy, but it is Toadling, where Toadling is like, I made this promise, but he's trying so hard, I should help him, because Toadling just really wants to help everybody. And I just love Toadling. And then La Belle Sauvage, which is the first book of the Book of Dust, is following Malcolm, who, this is a prequel to his Dark Materials series. So we have Lyra as a baby, and Malcolm ends up rescuing her from some people who are trying to take her. And that's kind of all I can really say, because everything else kind of spoils I don't know. I feel like that's the gist of it. So they go on this epic adventure through this big flood, and as an 11-year-old boy, he is caring for this tiny baby and just doing his best for her and sacrificing himself in a lot of different ways. All right, I'm going to give you two romances. So this is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. I haven't said the authors for all of these, have I? I've said them hit or miss. You can read them when I post them. This follows Red and Blue, who are spies on the opposite sides of a war that spans time, and one of them writes a letter to the other one to be like, haha, I got you, fuck you, and the other one writes back like, no, actually, if you look, I got you, so fuck you. And then they end up falling in love. So this one, because it has that surrealist aspect to it, and it's very poetic in its expressions of romance and love, it's not just all about the romance, but it is, and it has that surreal quality to it, is kind of why I wanted to put it here. And then Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is because of Circus. Circus is a Pisces, and I will not be argued with about that. So we are following Hala, who Hala has had a rough go of things lately. And she married a man who was older than her and then passed away. And then she went to go live with his uncle to be his uncle's carer. And then his uncle passed away and he left everything to her. But now she has these in-laws who want to keep all of his money in the family. So they want her to marry her cousin-in-law who has really clammy hands and she does not want to marry him. So she's looking around her room that she has been trapped in. And she sees a sword and she goes, don't people fall on their swords to get out of situations? Because if she passes away before she marries this clammy hands cousin, all of her wealth passes on to her nieces. So she's just going to take herself out of the equation. But when she opens up the sword, a man pops out and he goes, you're now under my protection and I cannot let you do that to yourself. So then they go on this epic journey to the Temple of the White Rat to get a lawyer who is also a member of the temple, to represent her in a court case. And so they're journeying back and forth across this road through most of the book, and Circus and Hala are kind of falling in love with each other, and they're both older characters. Circus is a few hundred years old, but most of his life has been trapped inside the sword, and he's probably around 40 or 50 when he went into the sword. Maybe 30. I don't know. I don't know medieval fantasy ages. But Hala is in her mid-30s. So we have older characters. And Hala is constantly questioning things. And Circus is getting annoyed but hiding his annoyance because of his feelings for Hala. And he's being very patient despite his ability to be patient. And it just feels very relatable for me. And so I am putting Circus as a Pisces in here. So yes, these are my two romances that I'm including. Selflessness. So I'm starting off with The Six Deaths of the Saint. This is a very short story by Alex E. Harrow that follows a servant girl who has been enlisted by the Saint of War to act as a warrior, and every time she dies she's reincarnated. And because she feels she owes a debt, she just keeps giving all of herself throughout this story. It was really good, really emotional. I really recommend it. And the next one is The Highland Witch by Susan Fletcher. This follows Corag, who is the Highland Witch. And Corag is the witch in the hills, and she gets this really big connection to the local clan, but she keeps herself isolated from them, but she heals for them, and she's invited to some of their parties, but she very much keeps to herself. And on the night of the massacre, she basically puts herself in massive peril in order to save these members of this clan. And it's just the constant of her giving all of herself to everybody around her and rarely seeing anything in reciprocation throughout the story. That very emotional, It's one of the few historical books that I've actually liked. I'm throwing a couple more in here. So for sensitive, so Pisces are overly sensitive, constantly reacting to things around them. I have one book that I actually didn't like, but I do feel like the vibes are kind of there. And so that's A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. And this is because the main character, Effie, who's just crying all the time over everything. This is a book, I feel like if I give you the synopsis, I'm going to be really mad about it, but it starts off in a school. Effie is an architect student. She doesn't want to be an architect, but she ends up, this is the only thing that she can do in this school because she wants to actually be a literary major, but she can't because she's a woman, so she ends up being an architect. And she wins this competition to go and redesign the house of her favorite author, and while she's there, she finds this boy who she decides is her academic rival because he checked out all the books that she wanted to check out from the library. It made her cry because all their books were gone. And the two of them start to unravel this mystery, and here it becomes a detective story. So I have lots of feelings about it, but I do think it fits it, and you might like it. The other one I have is The Assassin's Apprentice, and this is because Fitz is just a sensitive little bean through this first book. He takes everything to heart, everything that people say to him, and synopses again. So Fitz is, we start off following him from a very young age. He's 6 years old in the beginning. He's probably about 15 or 16 at the end. So this 10-year span of his life where he is the bastard of a prince who is destined to be king, and he gets dumped off with the king's men, and gets told, here's this thing, I don't want it anymore, and he ends up being raised by the stable master, and he goes through a lot of things. He gets trained for the skill, and when he's getting trained for the skill, he's just getting browbeaten by this very cruel teacher who just wants to beat him down to absolutely nothing. And he just takes it all in and believes everything he's told by this person. Everything. And he just... I wanted to give him a hug. So Fitz is just this overly sensitive little thing. The other thing he can do, but he's inwardly, he keeps it to himself. He never like bursts out with it. He just takes it in and absorbs it like a little sad sponge. It's so sad. He also has this like ability to sense animals and people around him. And that's kind of the other type interpretation of the word sensitive that I was using. I'm not explaining this book very well, but it's really good. I tell you, these books have Pisces vibes. Something about them just makes me feel Pisces vibes. So, Julia Armfield's Our Wives Under the Sea. For the anxiety-inducing, claustrophobic feeling of shit is going wrong and I can't fix it. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. For the like isolated, lonely vibes. Gathering Moss, actually, as a nonfiction. Just with the naturey, outdoorsy, reflective vibes. Organ Meats, again, for its surrealness and emotional acuity of the characters in the book and their attachment to spiritualism and the way that it's put out there. Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. So this book is told in two halves, and there's one half that's very sci-fi and one half that's very fantasy. And the fantasy side has a lot of kind of these surreal, ethereal, confused kind of vibes that it just kind of almost works. And then one I'm reading right now, Your Shadow Half Remains, and this is so far kind of surreal horror with a main character who's a little depressing. And a little lonely and not quite sure what's going on or how she's going to handle it. And then from my TBR, ones that I feel could have a little bit. So I did pull up the synopses for these, so I will briefly go over them. So The Memory of Animals by Claire Fuller. This one was just recommended to me because I liked Bright and Dangerous Objects. And this is, in the face of a pandemic, an unprepared world scrambles to escape the mysterious disease's devastating symptoms. So it is a pandemic story. So if that's something that bothers you, don't give it a go. But we have a woman who, in a hospital, makes a friend where she starts to question everything about every choice she's made in her life. And it's that internal reflection and questioning that gives me the Pisces vibes. The next one is Don't Go Without Me, which is a comic collection of 3 stories. And they all kind of have this... the first one is lovers getting separated and needing to exchange stories in order to be reunited. A ship that runs on memories, and the sole survivor of a shipwreck finds themselves consumed with everyone else's memories and emotions. And then the last one is... the residents of a small oceanside town living in the shadow of a sleeping giant. The next one is The Darkness Outside Us, which is a sci-fi that just got recommended to me. And this one is 2 boys alone in space. And they basically just kind of start falling for each other. And this kind of, it had those isolated, dreamy, surreally kind of vibes with, a little bit of romance. So it just kind of felt like it might. And then Wildflowers Electric Beasts by Alina Leonova. This is about 2 species of humans. One is technologically advanced and living in nature, and one lives in nature. And they end up becoming united with each other. They meet each other, and they both are, because they're both on different sides of a conflict, they have to basically risk everything to save everyone. And there's all this inner conflict and turmoil and lots of emotions, and it just feels like it might be. So those are my 4 that might be. So if you feel like I got any of these spot on, let me know. If you feel like I missed out on some that you really want me to know about, put them in the comments. And maybe I'll read them this month. So yes, thanks for sitting with me and listening to me talk about Pisces things and books that make me feel things in my Pisces soul, because that's basically what all these books were. And I will see you soon.